and welcome. I'm Kamla. My guest today is Joshua Dylan Mellars, who is a filmmaker located in North Bay, Sonoma County, right?
And San Francisco.
And San Francisco. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So you've got a trilogy of films, very interesting, unusual. The first one that we're going to talk about is Play Like a Lion. And then you had a film on Fado, the Portuguese soul music of Portugal.
Definitely.
And the third one is Tango.
Right.
What is this fascination with music and dance?
Well, what's not there to be fascinated about, right? You know, I think music was always sort of in my upbringing. My parents actually came to the San Francisco Bay Area following the music, because music in the 60s and 70s was obviously a very big part of the San Francisco Bay Area, as it is today. But there were a lot of different people coming together, different kinds of music. And so I grew up listening to a lot of music, from everything from blues to, you know, Indian classical music.
Oh, even Indian?
I did, a little bit to flamenco. And so it was all kind of in the mix. And, you know, growing up, I wanted to be a baseball player. I had no idea about being a documentary maker.
From a baseball player to filmmaker?
Yeah, to music and dance. So, you know, life takes you in these interesting cycles, but there's a line from the film which I like, which is an Indian proverb that says, "We will know our ends by our beginnings." And I guess having begun with music sort of always being in music from all over the world, being in my ears, I've kind of come full circle without even thinking about it.
But you're very young, so you know you still have a long way to go. And you had that little break in Latin America before you started?
Well, I wouldn't call it a break. It was my education, you know, my real education.
So before we talk about films, let's talk a little bit about you.
Okay.
You've got a very interesting profile. You were a competitive swimmer, you were into baseball, you were a school valedictorian, and then you went to Brown.
Right.
You left the Bay Area and went to the East Coast.
I did.
To Providence.
Right,
Did Providence take you there?
Well, you know...
Or was it intuition?
It was intuition, and a lot of the big decisions I've made or moves in life have all been intuitive, really, and that's really what I trust.
You mean logic is out of the door?
Well, logic is good for some things, but I think when it comes to big decisions, I trust my intuition more than, you know, you can think things out too much and then you don't go anywhere. And I think life is all about taking risks and taking chances and going to places that you didn't think you'd ever go to. And then when you find yourself in those situations, it becomes a big adventure, but somehow I think you find out something about yourself, and obviously you learn something about the world. So definitely Brown was a bit of intuition. I mean, I had some good references from an aunt who knew a lot about the different universities, and she's a PhD herself, and she thought it would be the right fit for me. And just
to go to Brown.
To go to Brown. And just based on that and some of the people who I'd met, I judge a lot of what I do in life based on the people. You know, how do I relate to whoever it is I'm talking to? And if I like that person, you know, I want to go in that direction. And so that's what took me to Brown, and I certainly don't regret the decision.
And that's where you discovered Fado.
That's where I discovered Fado.
And Fado is, we said, soul music of Portugal.
Yeah,
but
people call it the blues of Portugal. It's a very deep music, and it deals with something called saudade, this uniquely Portuguese idea, which is hard to describe. I mean, I basically made the documentary trying to get at what exactly is saudade, because it can mean like a longing or a nostalgia for the past, but it can also be sort of a longing for the future. It's a very complex and poetic idea, and Fado music, this beautiful music from Lisbon, is all about pouring out saudade. And I think if you just listen to the music, you sort of get an idea of what that saudade is. But it can mean all kinds of things to different people.
So does water have anything to do with creating that intense longing and a feel for home? Because in the film you talk about Portuguese sailor going from Lisbon to different parts of the world.
Certainly.
And one of the places they came to in your film, you track Vasco da Gama, who went to India.
Exactly.
And so Fado arrived in India in very interesting ways. Fado originated in the 19th century?
You know, it's considered to be about a 200-year-old music, but the roots of Fado go back deeper than that. That was when it kind of consolidated as maybe a form.
Does it have any Moorish
Oh, certainly,
heritage?
Yeah. If you listen to it, you can hear the Moorish. There's roots, I think, in Africa.
So my question was water. Does water do something? I mean, when you're traveling by sea, you know, you're confined in that small space.
Exactly.
So does that create a different environment that can't be created, say, in a train or a plane?
Well, it could, yeah, I think you're right, because when you're out on the ocean, and particularly when the Portuguese were first sailing, I mean, you know, there were people who at that time thought the earth was flat and you would fall off of it, you know, if you went far enough. And so it was very...
You didn't fall off, did you?
Not yet. Almost.
Okay.
But it's very daunting to think of getting on one of those rickety old ships and, you know, you're going somewhere and you hope your captain knows where you're going, but maybe he doesn't, and there's storms, and you're away from your family or you know your loved ones for months, maybe for years. You don't know if you'll ever see them again, and so it creates this sort of nostalgia and this longing for, I want to be back home. And I think we can all feel that, even in our day of, you know, cell phones and email, where we can stay very connected. When you leave a place that you know and people who you know well, you know, you start to have that kind of longing, and you begin to appreciate things about home that maybe you didn't appreciate when you were home, you know, and people.
How did you discover Fado in Goa? How did that come up in your conversation?
You know, it's really interesting, because as with a lot of things, we were talking about being intuitive, and a lot of things just sometimes fall into your lap without you looking for them. And this was the case. I was doing the documentary about Maestro Ali Akbar Khan, Play Like a Lion, and so I was going to India, but I was also simultaneously filming this documentary about Fado music. And I had struck up a bit of a friendship with the Portuguese Consul General in San Francisco. So when he found out I was going to India, he said, well, you can't go to India without passing through Goa and, you know, filming a couple of images of the colonial architecture. And I think he wasn't sending me there to necessarily help me out with my film. I think he just wanted to see some snapshots. He was very curious. He'd always had this kind of fantasy about what Goa was like. And so I thought, you know, that's a good idea. And I went there and I filmed, and I was only going to spend a couple days there, but I found that there was this thriving community of Goans who still speak Portuguese, who sing Fado. And in fact, there were too many people for me to include in the segment that I did on Goa about Fado. So it was really quite an incredible surprise. And I think that's the wonderful thing when you're making a documentary, to be able to just suddenly discover something that you hadn't expected. And then that becomes, I think it's one of the more beautiful segments in the film. I really love Goa and the Goans. And I think it's amazing when you're any place where there's that cultural mixture going on, you know, and that's why I love the San Francisco Bay Area, because there's just so many influences.
So Goa was, the Portuguese came to India first. They were the first Europeans to come.
Right.
And so Goa was a Portuguese colony all the way until 1961, as you point out.
Exactly.
And they still keep strong ties with Portugal.
They do, and it's interesting. Some of the singers there actually go and they've trained with some of the singers in Portugal, and they sing in the Fado houses where they sing Fado. So there's still some, you know, back and forth between.
Is it Fado or Fado?
Well, you know, we tend
because
to say...
I hear,
exactly.
It's like me saying
yeah,
Portugal
I'm sorry,
and Portugal.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
We tend to say here, you know, Fado, but in Portuguese, it's Fado.
Fado.
The okay. O on the end has the U kind of sound, so it's Fado, actually. So I may go between the two.
Yes, and in the film you also show the Fado guitar. How is that different from a regular guitar?
Well, you know, the Portuguese guitar, which is what it's called, looks kind of like a really big mandolin. And it's just this beautiful instrument, and there's nothing like it. And one of the Portuguese guitar players, the longtime Portuguese guitar players in the film, says that it can create the saddest music in the world. You know, this instrument can create the saddest music. And so they're very proud of it, but it does have a very distinctive sound, and the way they play it is fascinating because
they pluck it.
Well, you know, to be a virtuoso, obviously, you've got to have good hands, but they actually pretty much do a lot of their playing with just this one finger.
Index finger.
Yeah, a lot of it, they put like a little pick that they attach to the finger to give them a little strength, and then they're just going up and down with it, and they're going very, very fast.
Do you play instruments?
I play the guitar and the piano.
Okay,
so
so you're just not a filmmaker.
Well,
you do a lot.
Believe me, after filming all these master musicians, I don't even want to call myself a musician.
Josh, thank you so much for stopping by today.
Oh, my pleasure.
And thank you all for watching. We'll be back with another show. Until then, goodbye.